Alrighty, 3:26 Thursday. I don't even know how many days I've been stuck inside now, but I'm starting to lose it, man. How are you doing?
I'm having an okay time, I guess, of it. I mean, we have a lot of work we have to do, so fine. But yeah, I mean, being inside, I think I've taken like whether it be radio hits or just calls with people in the company. I've taken like 10 phone calls the last 2 days. I think every single one of them involves me like climbing like one of the hills around my house. That's how I'm trying to stay sane. But yeah, it's not the best situation.
I didn't go outside once yesterday, and I was sitting there at like 9 o'clock, and we were about to do our test for the live watch along that we are going to do. And I realized I hadn't gone outside yet, and I looked at myself in the mirror, and I was like, "This is a disaster." I had like my beard was scraggly, and my hair was disgusting, and I don't think I put deodorant on. It was a disaster. It was an absolute disaster. So
Well,
hopefully you can resuscitate me during this next hour of podcasting.
there is a really big benefit. I know you guys make fun of me a little bit, but there is a really big benefit to being more on the scruffy side, like me,
Mm.
because then this doesn't represent as big. Like I haven't worn jeans in like 3 weeks. You
Yeah,
know,
this is the first
like,
time I put on a shirt in the past 36 hours.
yeah, that's true.
So,
That
so there's
is
that.
there is
All right,
that.
let's start off with here's what we're gonna do. We've got free agency kind of leftovers. We're gonna talk a little bit about Robbie Anderson, Jadeveon Clown, the Panthers, what the hell they're doing. We're gonna talk MVP and division odds because those are available in some places. And our buddy Ben Brown wrote a great article about division odds picks, so you can go check that out. And then we're going to do some fun draft stuff. We're going to talk a little bit about which teams are in a position to potentially take advantage of some bad picks in front of them. And then we are going to draft positions in the NFL. This was a request from someone a few weeks ago. It was like, hey, I'm curious about where you would actually rank the position. So we're going to go 1 through, I guess, 22. We'll see how long we can make it. We're going to draft positions. That should be fun. You have a betting confession, and I have a quarantine story from the Y. So,
Oof.
so let's get it started. I mentioned the watch along. You're going to be doing a live watch along with Chris Collinsworth, Steve Palazzolo, Sam Monson. It's tonight. It's at 8 p.m. It's going to be on Twitter. It's going to be on YouTube. You guys are watching the Patriots-Seahawks Super Bowl, which should be awesome. You excited for this?
Yeah, I wasn't sure if we were allowed to say which Super Bowl yet, but yeah, I'm pumped.
Breaking
Honestly,
news.
I I've never I've never watched I've never watched a game with Chris before, so it'll be fun, even if it's in the background,
Yeah, and
to do
Chris
that.
called that game, obviously, so he should have some fun stories for that. So you guys should check it out. We're going to give away. I just touched my face. That's bad. We're going to give away some Edge subscriptions, so that'll include the draft guide too. So you should check it out, even if you hate that game. It'll be a lot of fun. Okay, let's start with the free agency stuff. Robbie Anderson goes to Carolina, and I guess it was a little confusing to me. Did the move make sense to you, Teddy Bridgewater fan numero uno?
Yeah, well, it is. If you look at the way in which that team's being built, it's a little bit, not inbred doesn't seem like the right word, but it's certainly a who you know situation, right? Because Rule was the head coach of Temple before he was the head coach of the Baylor Bears. Robbie Anderson was their number one receiver. My first year doing PFF, I did all the Temple games. So that was pretty, yeah. So like once you like take a step back and look, oh, that makes a ton of sense. No one likes Robbie Anderson, free agency, but then the Panthers going to get him. Joe Brady was an assistant with the New Orleans Saints in Teddy Bridgewater's first season for them. It doesn't look like they're really taking defense doesn't matter seriously because their defense doesn't matter at all. But and I don't know, these moves kind of make sense from the perspective of, okay, they're trying to build a culture, and at least Rule and Brady know the culture, for example, of the two most important players on offense.
Yeah, it was super interesting. The point that I made about Robbie Anderson was his average target occurred 16 and a half yards downfield over the last 3 seasons. It's the deepest of any receiver. He is a deep threat to a T. And Teddy Bridgewater has the lowest average depth of target at just past 6 yards downfield. And we had this conversation a bunch last year when he was barely pushing the ball downfield once a game when he started playing for the Saints. And you were saying, no, he can do it. They're just kind of easing him into it, making sure he feels comfortable. Do you think that he's eased into it enough that now he's going to start slinging it deep?
I don't know, man. I think the issue is his arm strength is not the best, but passing is more about anticipation. And we know, like, the LSU offense is extremely explosive, and Burrow isn't considered a player with like an immense arm talent either. But he was one of the more the better anticipators in that class, or probably the best, frankly. And and his receivers were so open that it often didn't matter. In Minnesota, Bridgewater was dealing with a ton of pressure. He was dealing with Mike Wallace being his best receiver, and in New Orleans, like as we talked about before, Ted Ginn was, he had less than 500 yards receiving, and he was the second wide receiver for the New Orleans Saints. Michael Thomas is more of an underneath guy. So while I'm not going to sit here and say Bridgewater is going to make Robbie Anderson great, and Robbie Anderson's going to average 20 yards a catch and all this kind of stuff, I'm going to pump the brakes a little bit on this idea that they don't fit at all and that Bridgewater can't go downfield, just because in all honesty, I like Bridgewater a lot, but we don't know that much about him, and it's sort of troubling. Anybody who makes grandiose statements about him really, I think, is lying, because there's so little that we actually, good or bad, that we can glean from the last 4 years.
It's a super weird situation. I expected Matt Rule to come in with that long contract and play for the future, like go all out for the future, and then he signs, then Joe Brady comes on board, and now this team is starting to feel as though it's like, oh, with Joe Brady here, if we get a quarterback who can do some of the things that Joe Brady likes to do, maybe we can compete kind of right away, which I don't know if that, I don't really understand that, to be perfectly honest, because they're still easily the worst team in that division. And even if Teddy Bridgewater hits his percentile, I don't really know if they're competing. So it's a weird spot for Matt Rule to be in, because I can't imagine that they want to go 7-9 3 straight years. And it makes me wonder about, Matt Rule and that whole, how does this play out?
Yeah, I mean, well, the last time that the Carolina Panthers switched coaches, it was Cam Newton's rookie year, and it was sort of that same thing where Newton blew up, but they couldn't defend anybody, and so they would lose all these games, 38-35 or something like that, and they ended up finishing 7-9. And at the same time, though, I mean, the hard part is there's a really big difference here. Like when the Packers, let Brett Favre go and kept Aaron Rodgers on to be the starter, they went 6-10 the following year and lost a lot of close games, but ultimately they found out that Rodgers was a good quarterback. And so the difference between getting the 5th pick and the 15th pick didn't really matter that much, right? Because once you have a quarterback, it's mostly, there obviously is a draft curve, but it's not all that steep, and you don't need, quarterback's really where it matters. So the hard part here is that really how they view Bridgewater? If Bridgewater blows up this year, but their defense can't stop anybody, and they go 8-8 and lose every game, 34-31, are they really going to be like, okay, Teddy's the guy now at, close to 30? Or, you know what I mean? That's really the tough part. If he was a rookie, I could see it, right? I could see trying to simultaneously figure out about him and lose at the same time, but Bridgewater's not in that position.
That's the weird thing. I said this yesterday. I feel like they could be headed for purgatory where you're just not, you're hovering in this mediocrity. You've invested in some players that should win now. It's very interesting, and I'm curious about how this Matt Rule thing ends up. He reminds me a lot of like a Bill O'Brien situation, right? So Bill O'Brien came into Houston and was like, what can Bill O'Brien do? Well, he can establish a culture. And like this culture, is going to get these guys in a winning mentality, and it's going to be great, because he resurrected this college program. He has some NFL experience. So this is our guy. And it hasn't, I don't know that it's necessarily been successful. He got kind of lucky, I think, to have Deshaun Watson. But if it hadn't been for Deshaun Watson, would Bill O'Brien still be the coach in Houston? I am not so sure.
Well, no, I mean, they went, 4-12 the year he got hurt, and all they've done is make a defense that was pretty good and good enough, excuse me, to win the AFC South twice in his first few years, and took them and made them bad. And, now they're taking an offense that's sort of trending it the same way. It shows how many sins a good quarterback can cover for. And there's a thought that maybe they're gearing up to give Watson a huge contract, and they're sort of trying to see, okay, can he be a quarterback to play on a huge contract, without the support that would, imply. But man, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And I wonder for Carolina, where are they going to be next year? What are the most likely options? What do you think?
I honestly think it's like 6-10, and they're sitting there going, "Shit, we probably should have just not signed anybody." They're looking. To me, they had an opportunity. So there are a couple teams that have a chance to actually tank next year because they could be that bad. You look at the Patriots. I think the Jaguars are another one. But teams like the Dolphins, who are just good enough that they're going to be on the outside looking in with potentially no viable option at quarterback. So if you go 6-10 and Bridgewater plays all 16 games and is QB 20 or QB 17, like you said, I don't think you're going, okay, this is our guy for the next 5 years. I think you're going, well, shit, who's available at pick 10? And it's not Justin Fields and not Trevor Lawrence. That's my point, which I don't think is a good one.
Okay. Let's be positive here then. What happened? Okay, because you can, although during the season you can see this thing happening and do what the Miami Dolphins did, right? Where you have pieces. They traded Minkah Fitzpatrick during the season. They traded, they made some trades that like helped them now, because like basically like if the Dolphins wanted to, they could have the number 1 pick, right? Because they have enough ammunition to move up there. If the Panthers start out 0-5, there's a pretty good chance that they could trade Christian McCaffrey to a mark, right? They could. On defense, they're a little rough, quite a bit. They don't have a whole lot of superstars there, but like they could trade DJ Moore to a team that needs wide receiver. Like there's a path to getting the number 1 pick that isn't just, being terrible, right? And I think that can become pretty apparent before the trade deadline.
I would have been all on board with that being a possibility, and I said this when they originally signed him. I was like, this is the perfect, we could tank, but we could also find out if Teddy is good situation. But when they signed Robbie Anderson, I go, okay, well, if that's really how they feel, this is incongruent. Because they had enough playmakers where you go, I think we can see whether Teddy's got it or not, with the guys that we have on this team. I don't think we need to go sign another guy. Now, they got him for a decently cheap price, but I just think that's a sign that they might not be willing to do that. The other thing that I thought was interesting about, we talked a little bit about this on the last, but that there is a real sign that the defensive back market, it's not hot, right? Like Nickel Roby-Coleman is a really solid slot receiver, and he's getting paid literally a nickel. Why? What's the best explanation for why this is?
I don't know. I would say that the best defensive backs are getting signed by their teams in advance, maybe, but it also there's some instability at the position. Um, but I just don't think people have caught up, and maybe people have the intuition that we came up with a month ago or so, which is that it's more depth than it is stars, right? I mean, we've seen Tremaine Johnson get big contracts, we've seen Xavier Howard get big contracts, we've seen Xavier Rhodes get big contracts, and so on and so forth. And the Bengals did the same thing with Trey Waynes just a few days ago. And people are like, well, that's not going to really help your defense. It's more about depth. And so they wait back and they sort of get secondary players. Mackenzie Alexander was a good deal. Brashad Breeland, who, won a Super Bowl with Kansas City, started every game last year. He's still a free agent. I think but I don't know, man. I don't know. But they're also are pretty. They've just been pretty, like, there aren't that many big defensive contracts this year. Jones being one of them, Slay being one of them, DeForest Buckner being one of them. But like a guy like Jadeveon Clowney's on the still a free agent now, and so maybe people are just realizing that defense doesn't matter that much.
Wow, that's such a rosy outlook. That's giving so much credit to these teams.
It's not the truth, probably.
Let me debunk all of your hypotheses here. So the Clowney one is easy. Clowney is a guy that neither of us would pay, first off, because he's a defensive lineman, and the value there is greatly overblown. But even if you were to pay a defensive lineman, it would have to be one that could rush the passer. He doesn't rush the passer well. And usually the NFL looks at sacks as a barometer for that, which is terrible and stupid. But he doesn't have any sacks, so they align with us there, and that's why he's not getting paid. And no one has watched.
By pure luck.
Yeah, right, exactly. No one has watched the Michigan-South Carolina game during quarantine and decided that that's the guy they need. So that's the Clowney reasoning. I think so. If a defensive coordinator came in and said, "What do I need to be successful?" To me, it's them saying it's about the scheme more so than it is the players. And so they're not going to overvalue a guy in coverage, because what really matters is that he can play their scheme and that guy can put him in the right place. And it may be a like kind of circuitous way of getting to what you wrote about, which was, hey, it's great to have really good corners, but it's more important to have a bunch of really good ones. Because if you have one guy that is just killing you and he's your third corner and you've got to play him for 80% of the snaps in the game or more, you're going to get torched. But I don't know, man. It's still confusing me, because the Quentin Dunbar thing, why are you getting a fifth-round pick back for a guy that was so good at such a valuable position? Like, did they really call up Seattle? Washington called up Seattle and was like, look, can we get a fifth-round pick for Quentin Dunbar?
Well, the same day that they trade basically the same pick for Kyle Allen, who stinks, like, out loud. I mean, the Kyle Allen being traded for something when Cam Newton was traded for nothing, and then the Quentin Dunbar really does make you wonder what these people are thinking. There could be, obviously, there are always things behind the scenes that we don't know about. I know Dunbar didn't like being in Washington, but at the same time, as I've always said, if you can't manage talented people, you suck. So good for Seattle. I mean, honestly, and we're not going to sit here and say, oh, Seattle's a genius because, the Frank Clark trade because then they'll go and draft LJ Collier, right? So it's a good move for them. They really needed it last year. And so hopefully, for them, it helps them rebuild their defense a little bit. It'll be interesting to see if they go back to Clowney after, he doesn't have a whole lot of suitors, the first 2 weeks.
We'll move on to MVP odds here in a sec, but your buddy Matthew Collar and I had a good conversation the other day about the importance of, like, people management and how that definitely shows up in, the win-loss column, but in, like, a consistency, right? So you have guys like Bill Belichick who have the ability to manage talent and pick talent that he can manage in a very, very unique way. And then you have teams who simply cannot manage talent, and it shows up because they're all over the place, right? They've got players going in and out, left and right, and they're not able to sustain any sort of winning. And I just think it's super interesting, and you know, it's probably super rare to find a guy that's good from an X's and O's standpoint and can manage people well. But there's only 32 of these jobs. Like, I don't know. It's a little surprising that so many of them.
Well, and I was having a conversation with a friend about this as well. It's also like different types too, right? Like, I mean, Belichick is a great manager of players, but probably not the best manager of coaches if you want to grow them personally. You know, like they've all done great jobs working for Belichick, but almost none of them have had success on their own. And whereas you look at somebody like Andy Reid. He manages people completely differently, and he gets almost the same result, not quite as good of results as Belichick on the field, clearly, but his assistants at John Harbaugh won a Super Bowl, Doug Peterson won a Super Bowl, like he's sent them off and made them have good careers beyond, and those are the two shining lights. We've seen complete disasters everywhere else. And it's just sort of interesting to think about. Maybe that's the next thing in terms of trying to find an edge in terms of understanding the league. It's just looking at the management styles of some of these people. I mean,
that's a great point.
We talk about Matt Rule, right? Like Matt Rule, like there's a little bit of Chip Kelly-ness to him, right? Like in trying to acquire his players and opting for. So Chip Kelly opted for less talented players that he could sort of mold, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, Bradford was a player.
A combo of Bill O'Brien and Chip Kelly would be something.
Well, but you know what I'm saying? Like, there are people. So when I used to teach, right, there were two types of professors. There were the professors who were scared that there was a student in the class smarter than them, and then there were those that weren't. And those that weren't were better because they didn't put a ceiling on the growth, right? But there was also the hit to your ego that you can take, right? The fact that somebody half your age is very talented, and I think that Andy Reid doesn't seem to have that, right? He seems to just be able to be happy for people when they have success, and he that's how he manages. Other people are different, and I think that's why, for example, Brad Childress never got along with Brett Favre, because Brett Favre didn't need Childress, and he could call his own plays, and it drove Childress insane, regardless of the fact that they were a Super Bowl contender, like they were having success. Some people are not happy having success unless it's their kind of success.
I just think the Belichick-Reid thing is Reid looks for those characteristics and Belichick values different characteristics in his, and that neither of them are thinking about necessarily whether one is going to be good as a head coach later on. It's just what they're looking for to build their staff. Okay, MVP odds and division odds. We'll run through this kind of quickly because I think there's some interesting ones given where we're at right now, right before the draft, but after free agency. So I'm looking at MVP odds. I found some on Bovada here. Obviously, Mahomes is the favorite at 4-1. Enticed by that at all? No.
That's not
really.
No, 4-1. I mean, that's a sucker bet.
Yeah, but he's your boy, and he didn't win it last
of course
year.
But
clearly the best quarterback in the NFL.
Yeah,
great offense.
He could. I mean, yeah, but it's also they don't like repeat winners. But he didn't repeat last year. I mean, I would rather take the Chiefs at plus 550 to win the Super Bowl.
Oh, really?
I get a better payout that way.
Yeah, I mean, slightly. That's interesting. I think I would rather go Mahomes 4-1 to win the MVP. And here's my reasoning why. So Lamar Jackson, they don't like repeat winners, right? That's going to be tough for Lamar Jackson. Russell Wilson has the trouble of not having that great of a team. Mahomes is so clearly the best quarterback on the best team, and he's not. I don't think there's any Mahomes fatigue because last season he didn't dominate until the playoffs and
Yeah.
until that kind of Herculean run. I think there's going to still be a ton of steam on him. And there's a chance that he's just so far and away the best player that they just have no choice. If he stays healthy,
Yeah.
I think I would rather have 4-1 for him to win the MVP than the Super Bowl, that's interesting. That's a good way of looking at it. Who are some others that you like? Because I've got a couple on here.
Yeah. So here's one that doesn't make any sense to me, which is Kyler Murray at 10-1. I like Murray. Obviously, we had a discussion about him yesterday with somebody who we work with, but it's not, that's egregious. The fact their path to winning that division is about as murky as mine walking uphill both ways to exercise in Madeira, Ohio. There's no he's a 25-1 maybe. So circling back, I like Carson Wentz at 25-1. Carson Wentz and Kyler Murray should have the same odds to win the MVP, if not better odds for Wentz.
I agree. So I liked Wentz as well. Here are a couple that I thought. So I thought the Murray one was hilarious in comparison to Deshaun Watson, who's 20-1. And while I like the Deshaun Watson one, is that if he plays really well, despite having DeAndre Hopkins leave in a division that isn't particularly strong, and they're not the favorites, but hey, the Colts and Phillip Rivers, are they that big of a juggernaut? Absolutely not. So he could have one of these narrative-driven seasons where it's okay, this guy has ascended. If he just plays at anywhere near the same statistical level as the top tier of quarterbacks and they win, it'll be viewed as more impressive. So I like that. And he's a guy that that I'm not worried about having a bad offseason. I know he's going to come in prepared. A guy that I don't have that feeling about, and that's why he's 33-1, is Baker Mayfield. Here's the thing. 33-1, there's a chance that it was just all Freddie Kitchens. There's a legit chance that it was all Freddie Kitchens. And that Kevin Stefanski is going to come in, and those just terrible, terrible mismanagements that Freddie Kitchens made are going to go away, and that offense is going to be amazing, and people will hop right back on the Baker Mayfield bandwagon.
No, I like Mayfield a lot this season. I don't think of him as an MVP candidate, but I do think of him as a top 10 quarterback this year. I think Stefanski will do a terrific job. I mean, you can make Kirk Cousins look like a top 10 quarterback. You can make Baker Mayfield look like a top 10 quarterback.
Right. And we didn't think of Lamar Jackson as an MVP guy last year, right, at this time.
Plus he's in great shape, right? So that it's gonna Baker's not gonna want to be fatter than his coach, right?
Can't do a push-up, but oh well.
There was absolutely no way he was gonna be fatter than Freddie Kitchens, but Stefanski's a good looking guy, right? He's gonna motivate Baker to not be so fat, right? And to get himself in shape.
Here's the thing. So I don't know if you saw this yesterday, but the Cheesecake Factory said they're not paying rent on any of their locations after some date or whatever. So now Mayfield, all his Cheesecake Factory stock is going in the tank. He's going to have to really play well because he needs the second contract now, or he will not be profiting well into the latter stages of his life. Are there any others, maybe any running backs that you really like?
No, I mean, remember last year we had Ben Stockwell on our pod, and they asked for our favorite non-quarterback, and I gave him Trubisky, probably my best pick of all time. But
that was incredible.
The fact that there are probably people betting real grocery money on J.J. Watt, Khalil Mack, Nick Bosa, Aaron Donald, Joe Burrow. Here's one that's a decently long shot. I think Russell Wilson at 7.5-1 is among the guys that are not long shots. He's the best bet because at some point they got to give him some respect. But here's the long shot I really like: Matthew Stafford, 60-1.
Yeah, that's great.
Stafford is a good quarterback, and I think people are started to wise up to that last year. The fact that he had that horrible Detroit team at like 500 before he got hurt, and then they literally didn't win a game the rest of the year. The defense will certainly be better. The NFC North will be worse. You can make an argument that he's the best quarterback in that division. Yeah, I still would put Rodgers ahead of him, but he's in the same stratosphere at this point as a regressing Rodgers. So I like that one.
I'm with you on that. I don't think I had any other long shots. I did think it was pretty funny that that Brady was 10-1, and Kyler Murray was also 10-1. That cracked me up a little bit. And then Jameis Winston, without a team right now, is 50-1. So I think you're probably going to sprinkle a couple dollars on that and not tell anyone about it.
Yeah, well, we'll talk about at the end of the show. We'll talk about me sprinkling a few dollars on something and not wanting to tell anybody about it.
God, the strip clubs are now essential businesses. Is that what you're going to tell me?
Well, not to get too far on a tangent, but weren't like Wall Street bankers allowed to write off like that as like stress relieving activity? I'm fairly certain that
real?
they could write those off as expenses. Yes.
Wow, I can't believe our.
Have you ever seen Margin Call? I feel like that. I feel like that. Yeah, that's the truth.
I need to watch that movie. You've talked to me about it a bunch. Okay, let's do division odds. So our buddy Ben Brown, he's fantastic. He writes a bunch of really good stuff on PFF.com. And he wrote about division odds. So I figured it made sense for us to talk about division odds and which ones we like. So if you were going through and there was one division winner that you had to bet on right now, who would it be?
Yeah, that's a good one. This is going to be congruent with my my earlier hashtag take, but I like Detroit plus 900 to win the NFC North. Minnesota
I gave it to you.
Minnesota stinks. Chicago is trying to build their defense again. Nick Foles, like the only thing. I think they got it. They're better than 1-10. Let's put it that way.
They're certainly better than that. I thought Detroit was a no-brainer as well. I mean, they have just if you look at the order of how the book who has the most likely, second most likely, third most likely, least likely to win the division. The Lions should not be the least likely, and they should be.
I don't know. USA Today gave the Vikings an A- for their free agency activity.
The simple fact is people have forgotten very much so that the Lions were just a hair away from beating and really got very unlucky to not beat the Kansas City Chiefs when the Chiefs were healthy with Mahomes last year, right? I mean, we watched that game and we're like, after that game, we're like, wow, there's going to be a ton of value in the Lions, and everything else, kind of fell apart. But if Stafford comes back healthy, that's basically the same team that you've got. And the loss of Darius Slay definitely hurts them, but it wasn't, Darius Slay obviously did not get along with Patricia and that scheme last year. And so maybe he wasn't, maybe he was sort of hurting them from a culture standpoint and from an on-field standpoint by not wanting to do anything Patricia wanted him to do, which is, on Patricia as much as it is on Slay. But now they'll have more a subservient coverage unit that will listen to Patricia, and that helps them a little bit.
Yeah. Well, and there's a lot of benefits. So I'm trying to look at there is like a little bit of a benefit as well in having like a last place schedule. In the sense that the two teams that you have to face, are all so you have to face Arizona in Arizona, which was a tie game last year. It kind of sucks a little bit, but you also get Washington, which that's a stinker. And then the other thing that's not trivial at all is that they get basically the AFC South, which is going to be cheeks, and the NFC South, which could go either way, right? But there's a really good chance that both of those like off schedule divisions that they play are bad, and so they can have some success early, and then we know that's getting out ahead and having a good record, early on is a pretty good thing.
The Lions were also my favorite one. So what I have for you is a potpourri of long shots that tickled my fancy. The first one is the Dolphins at like 10-1 to win the AFC East, because that whole division is a total atrocity. And with Ryan Fitzpatrick, look, dude, there's a legit. Ryan Fitzpatrick is not really any worse, if not better, than all of the other quarterbacks in that division. And the Dolphins, there's rumor that they tried to get Jadeveon Clowney, which means they're trying to win now. And they have a ton of picks. So this is one of the things I think looking at who has a ton of picks can give you a little edge up, right? They're going to accumulate a ton more talent than these other teams. And in a really bad division, those odds are fantastic. I also think that the Browns at like 5-1 to win the AFC North are a long shot that I would be a fan of. And then, I mean, honestly, the Bengals, like 30-1, not a terrible one either. And then
30-1 is so worth it because then you could prop swap it or whatever. Like if they start 5-1 or something like that, you can. Yeah.
No, that's a great point. And I'm always a year early on teams. And so last year, I thought the Cardinals had an out to basically be the like worst to
sweat
first
out
thing.
their over 5.5 week 17 was certainly not fun.
Yep. But they're a team similarly who they pick up DeAndre Hopkins for literally nothing, right? They give away, they get rid of David Johnson's contract, give up a second-round pick. And then they also have the number 8. So they have this huge influx of talent, and they're 10-1. So those are some of the long shots that I think are fun.
So like I did for MVP, I'm going to give a couple of the worst bets here. Like,
yes.
And it pains me, but the worst bet on this board is Kansas City minus 500 to win the AFC West.
Yeah, what the hell?
If you are laying a price with an implied probability of 83%, like, I know the Chiefs have won 4 straight AFC West titles, and they've lost 3 division games in the last 5 years. But that's atrocious. Last year at this time, they were minus 150, which made a lot of sense because people are like, oh, the Chargers are great, and the Chiefs didn't even have a road game against the Chargers. But that's a far cry from minus 500. They are the favorite, but if you lay minus 500 for the Chiefs to win the AFC West, that's how you'll go broke. Long term, another one, 2 more that are terrible. New England plus 105 to win the AFC East is an absolute lighting your money on fire. And the Vikings plus 175 to win the NFC North is, again, you are lighting your money on fire.
The Patriots one is the worst. The absolute worst.
We've been doing updates to our projections and like trying to figure out how to like properly, but like we price in markets and the market's still too high in the Patriots. It's like as I wrote on the website this week, like if they start Jarrett Stidham, they are going to lose 13 games.
I think the Patriots one is even worse than the Chiefs because at least you get Mahomes.
Right. But you're sweating. I mean, the Chiefs could make the playoffs and have a good season and not win the division. Like if the Chargers go 12-4, right, and they go 11-5, they'll still have a good season and you lose a minus 500 bet.
Tyrod Taylor's not going 12-4. But I'm just saying, if I had to be an idiot and take a really bad bet, I would rather take the Chiefs at that ridiculous price than the Patriots, I think. I don't know. It's close. Okay. Are you ready to do some draft stuff?
Sure. Let's do it.
Okay. Reminder, the new draft guide is up. You should go check it out. Comes with an Edge subscription, which is like the best deal ever. The draft guide is awesome, so you can go check that out. Grab one. let's do this. So we're going to draft positions here. Before we do, I want us to take a look real quick at the draft order right now. What's one team that you look at and you go, this team, they could really profit from a couple of stupid moves that might happen ahead of them?
Oh, it's a really good question. Well, I think that the first one is the Detroit Lions at 3.
Yes. Right?
Right?
Like, it's almost, they're going to get handed something great, and I can just feel it.
Yes. Well, because, okay, so Cincinnati drafts Burrow, and then Washington drafts Chase Young. Now you're hanging on to the Tua pick, right?
Hmm?
And you're a team that needs depth. And, the Dolphins are 2 picks behind you, right? So you can go and get pick up an extra first-round pick, boom, right there. Like, to me, the Detroit Lions are in a perfect position in this draft, right? Because if Washington or somebody else takes Tua at 2, then you're left with the best defensive player on the board. If they don't, then you have the Tua pick in your hand and an opportunity to either take him and sit him behind Stafford or trade it. But in any event, the teams in front of Detroit can't do anything to prevent Detroit from having a great draft.
Yep. That was certainly one. Another one that I think is in a really nice position is the Arizona Cardinals. And the reason for that is that you've got the Chargers now. You've got the Chargers potentially taking Justin Herbert. Okay, great. You didn't want Justin Herbert. And then you have the Giants potentially taking Mekhi Becton. And then no other team ahead of you, right? If Carolina goes with, like, say, Simmons or something, no other team ahead of you taking a tackle or a wide receiver. So you're sitting there with your pick of best tackle or best wide receiver for a team that just picked up DeAndre Hopkins. To me, that's a pretty enviable position to be in.
Yep. I mean, I think any position in that top 10 where, whether it be the Chargers, the Panthers, Dolphins, even if they get skittish, that involves them taking that third quarterback who isn't particularly good, and Herbert or Love, then it just benefits everybody downstream. And the Cardinals probably the first one there. The Panthers too. I mean, the fact is the Panthers might end up with Isaiah Simmons, just by sheer luck, right? Just by the fact that the Chargers don't want him. And that would be a really nice come up for them because they need talent defensively.
I also look at
another one that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, the one that. So the one that I kind of like. So San Francisco at 13 has already benefited from another team not being particularly great with assets,
Correct.
having 13. But I also think, so you look at the teams just directly in front of them, the Raiders, the Jets, the Browns, the Jaguars. There is a team in that quartet of teams that's going to take an interior player.
Yes.
And that is going to bump, whether it be CeeDee Lamb, Henry Ruggs, one of the cornerbacks, Diggs, Jerry. Right, one of those. Judy's probably gone by then, but if any one of those 4 teams takes an interior, like the Jets, well, Quinnen Williams, we took him last year. We're going to build a really strong interior. We're going to be great from inside out. Let's get a guard at 11. Like one of those, and they probably won't do that. There's no guard at 11, but you know what I'm saying? Like Cleveland Browns, like they don't have a great interior defensive line. They could take Derek Brown there or Javon Kinlaw, like somebody like that. And I think that the San Francisco 49ers benefit immensely from that. A, it keeps them from taking that player. And B, it gives them a better opportunity to take a wide receiver or a defensive back, as we said the other day, which would be better for them.
Or if there's a team that feels really strongly about a particular receiver or DB and wants to trade up, right? I'm thinking about the Broncos, for example. Say like Henry Ruggs is still on the board,
Yeah.
and so and they really want Ruggs, and so that they make that move up and you pick up an extra pick. But really, I just wanted to talk about this so that we could talk about how the Niners are in a good position. Because I agree with you. I think they, Derek Brown and Javon Kinlaw, can you imagine if they both go 4-13?
Yeah. And
I'll be doing
again, like,
somersaults.
well, like I said, it's sort of it prevents you from making a poor decision as well if you're a 49ers fan. Because, again, the Niners are very good, where it counts, but they could use reinforcements if they're, because people are going to be gunning for them. Noise is going to be gunning for them. They could really use another receiver or defensive back. All right, what's your next one?
That's actually, it was going to be the Niners. So that was my group. I figure now we just go on and draft our positions, which should be
Okay,
fun.
so
For this.
okay, well, and let's throw quarterback out because that's obvious.
Yep. Pick one. It's just your quarterback.
Draft positions in this. I'm sorry. I thought we were just drafting in order of like which position is most important.
Yep, exactly.
Okay, so quarterback's most important.
Yep. Quarterback is one. No doubt about it. It's
Yeah.
one, and then there's a giant chasm between 1 and 2. But I think 2 is interesting, and I am excited to hear your thoughts on with the second pick, who you would take.
Yeah, well, wide receiver for me is 2. A couple of reasons. Defense offense is more important than defense. B, defense is more depth dependent than it is star dependent than Burke. And C, the wide receiver is the player that most directly impacts the most important position, which is QB. So that's why I go with wide receiver.
Yeah, I think honestly, until you did that research about how fragile is defense and coverage in particular, there would have been a much bigger argument on should this be wide receiver number 1 or cornerback number 1. And I think we still would have gone with wide receiver because offense is more important and more stable. But now I think it's pretty clear cut to the point where now at pick 3, I would make a claim that you would actually go wide receiver 2 over cornerback 1. Am I crazy?
No. I mean, what are the 2 alternatives? So far you don't have a defense at all.
Correct.
But you can outscore a team. You can pray that the other team makes unforced errors on the offensive side of the ball, and you have the football last, right? And, kind of doing what Kansas City said. If you don't have a number 2 receiver, I mean, we've even seen, like, you talk about Minnesota all the time. Now that they have Tajay Sharp, all their problems are solved. But like, the Chiefs lost a game against Indianapolis at home because their best receiver was Byron Pringle, right? When they lost Tyreek Hill, they struggled as an offense. When they lost Sammy Watkins for a little bit, they struggled as an offense. It matters a lot, and it matters to have a lot of good receivers. So I don't hate it. I'm a little bit on the fence because I do think you do have to start building up depth, but I don't reject it offhand. But if you're going to go with receiver, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say here is my strategy. I would go receiver 2 here, and then go all corners for like the next 3 picks.
Yeah, and I don't hate that. So so if you go wide receiver 2, I'll go corner 1, then you go corner 2. I'd imagine, yes.
Yep. So my 4th pick would be my first cornerback, and then you would take. What would you do?
And then I would take corner 2.
Oh, interesting. Okay. But you, through 4 picks, you have a quarterback, your best receiver, and 2 corners. I have a
Oh, I'm
quarterback,
sorry. So
2
I thought we
receivers.
were just snake draft. I thought we were just snake drafting this. No, I would go if so. I would deviate a little bit from you and going quarterback, receiver, corner, receiver.
And I was just, yeah. So then I would go quarterback, receiver, receiver, corner, which
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's very close, right? I don't think either one is more, is that much more right if one is right than the other.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. It's interesting. I'm taking notes here so that I can recap because I think it helps for us to see where we disagreed slightly.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so pick 5. What would you do here?
So I have 2 wide receivers and a DB and a corner. I would take now a safety,
Interesting.
like a Tyrann Mathieu type.
So not a not a deep safety,
Not
like
a safety that can play slot and deep, and the best of all worlds basically in that position.
you're taking Derwin James is what you want to do.
I mean, yeah, I mean Derwin James, uh, uh, Tyrann Mathieu, tomato.
Okay. I like that. Uh, I think here I would go. I think I would be very tempted to go corner 2, although I really do like your hybrid safety thing. So I will side with you there, pending you can get a safety like that. I think if that's not something you can do when you're building your team, then I would go just coverage player number 2. So corner 2 if that's the best guy.
Okay. Um,
Oh,
I'm going to deviate a little bit here with my next pick. I'm going to take a left tackle.
interesting. I thought this was coming. Give me your.
Well, I mean, for me, it's mostly just again supporting the quarterback. And while so I already have 2 receivers, I need to start building an offensive line.
Yeah, I'm with you. I debated, so I was thinking about tackle here, and then I debated going, another coverage guy, but especially given the drop off, right? If you're valuing tackle as your sixth pick, so to speak, I think that's where you're getting basically average tackle play, and
Mm-hmm.
you can't. The difference between great and average is far less than the difference between average and really bad. And
Yep.
and I just don't think we can afford really bad at the tackle position. So I'm with you here. So left tackle at 6. At 7 is where I would go. I would go back to the either receiver or coverage well. Are you with me on that?
Yeah, I would take a nickel type player.
Another.
So if I'm going to build a secondary, I've completely changed my mind on this. By the way, it's different than it was maybe a year ago. I would prefer to have a weakness at one of the outside corners if I have a good other corner, and then patch that up with a nickel and a free safety.
Interesting. Okay.
So
I had.
I would.
Uh-oh. I may or may not have lost you for a
I'm
second there.
here.
Oh, okay. I'll just put cornerback number 2, and we'll call that a nickel here. I so I like the idea of solidifying the slot, especially given the way that teams are like increasingly taking advantage of that. So you just look at receivers that generally when they're targeted are wide open or have, at least a step of separation, and it's all these guys in the slot. It's like Cooper Kupp, like 80% of his targets come and he's open. And that makes it easier for your quarterback. It makes it easier for the receiver just by virtue of playing in the slot. So I think that's super valuable, and it's something that you could get. If you value this position at number as the seventh most valuable position, you can get like the best slot guy because the league doesn't value him that highly.
Exactly. That's exactly what Belichick learned with nose tackles in the 3-4. If no one plays a 3-4, you're going to get a nice come up if you take that guy, because you're going to get the best and you're going to pay him like the 30th best. Just a little point of reference, and again, we learn this as we continue to study football every year. Take the two Super Bowl teams. Where both weaknesses defensively for both Super Bowl teams were the second outside corner.
No, that's a great point.
Both defensive coordinators are good enough to sort of like scheme that away.
That's a good point. Okay, so we're 8 picks in. We have the same composition of players here. Quarterback, 2 receivers, a safety, 2 corners, 1 an outside guy, 1 a nickel, and a left tackle. I, at this point, am going to go with receiver number 3. Your thoughts?
You can't go wrong here, especially the way the third wide receivers don't play. If there are, let's say that there are 2,500 snaps to be played at wide receiver in an NFL team, it no longer is 1,000, 1,500. It is, 800 times 3. So that's 3-ish. And that's why I think third receiver is way more valuable than it used to be. So,
all right. Next pick.
I'll probably go with you with that. I would say this is the time that I will take an edge player.
Now, this means you're getting a really crappy edge player, right? If you value them this low in the totem pole.
It's not, though, right? Because we can project edge players a lot better than we can project other positions. So this is where I find my Shaq Barrett. This is where I find my Carl Lawson in the draft. This is where I go and use the like we're a lot better at projecting these guys. So, you can find somebody that's scheme dependent and good, and like this will be my last defensive lineman for a while, but I do think I can find somebody who's good here.
That's interesting because I actually think you could go farther down the list and still have that guy. When I said crappy, I kind of meant from like the public perception, like, oh, this guy kind of stinks, I'm totally with you there. I think you could make a real case for another tackle because at this point you are, potentially still getting a guy that can be average, but you're sneaking into this guy really, really sucks part of the tackle bin.
That being said, we know that the O-line is a weak tie system, and rushing the passer is less of a weak tie system. So if you're gonna go for brilliance, you'd rather go for brilliance in the edge spot. But I agree with you. This is a good time for a tackle as well.
Do you want to go? Let's split the difference. Keep things the same. So we go edge, and then do you want to go tackle?
Right tackle 1. Okay.
All right. So we're 10 picks in. Here's how we went. We went quarterback, wide receiver 1, both on the same page there, At pick 3, I would have taken wide receiver 2. You would have gone cornerback 1. At pick 4, I would have then gone cornerback 1. You would have gone wide receiver 2. So same, we just flipped the orders there. And then pick 5, most valuable, we went like hybrid safety, Tyrann Mathieu type safety. Pick 6, we went left tackle. Pick 7, we went with a nickel corner. Pick 8, we went with wide receiver numero tres. Pick 9, edge defender. And pick 10, right tackle. If those are the 10 positions you prioritize, I think you're in a pretty darn good spot.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And from here, now you're looking at, success stories from around the league. So think about, the 49ers, for example. Their 2 guards are guys that other teams didn't want, and they're one of the most explosive offenses in the NFL. The Chiefs just signed Mike Pennell to a 1-year deal, a guy they got off the street, and a guy who, contributed to their play. Like, at this, you're like, oh, what if you miss out on a nose tackle? It's like, well, no, Mike Pennell is literally like Mike Pennell is signable at all times, right? These are the guys that are more or less not signable when you need one the most, which is your tackles, your receivers, your cornerbacks, and obviously quarterback, and then an elite edge player. Your elite edge player, not an elite edge player for the NFL, but.
Yep. So let's just talk about like where we would then go positionally from here. My thought is, okay, now I'm kind of scraping out the average to below average players from whatever position I'm looking at. And so I would now be prioritizing depth and coverage. And that includes, looking at linebackers who can cover, guys that are more of that hybrid role, a deep safety, an outside corner. And I am waiting for a while to take interior line and interior line on either side.
Yeah. I here am just taking safeties.
Okay.
So, well, and we haven't even talked about tight end yet. I mean, I think wide receiver 3 is a tight end if the tight end is still elite at that point. But I right now am taking safeties because they can play linebacker for me if I get into a huge bind.
I like that. I like that. So my thing with the tight end is this. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say again, when you look at the Super Bowl teams, the 2 biggest free agent signings at linebacker were the 2 worst players on both defenses. So like you don't need to. Linebacker is not a position of need. Linebacker is a position you fill out at the end.
Yep. And when I say linebacker, like my ideal linebacker is basically Derwin James. So.
Mm-hmm.
That should be clarified there. Who are your last? So say we get to pick 22. Who's pick 22? Your last pick of your starting.
Well, my last pick when I'm starting is a depth player.
No. Say you have to fill out. Say it's like fantasy where you have to fill out a certain set of positions or something.
Well, okay, so I'm going to take. This happens every once in a while in fantasy. I'm going to take the wide receiver that's like a glitch and randomly eligible to be running back.
That's smart. Yeah, I think,
I'm going to take Marquise Colston, randomly eligible to be tight end his rookie year in fantasy.
Yeah. No, that's smart. I would be tempted to go right guard though.
Oh, sure. I mean, I'm going to fill out my offensive line and my defense. Yeah, I'll fill out a dime defense. But my thing is I'm not going to take a running back. No, I'm going to do what the Packers did and put Randall Cobb next to Aaron Rodgers if I have to. I'm going to put Ty Montgomery. Yeah, exactly. Like, come on.
No, I'm with you. I was gonna be on the same train as the. There's no way I'm actually taking a running back to play running back. I'll put anyone else there, and then get one off the street. Anything else you want to say on this drafting of positions before you confess to me what you did from a betting perspective?
No, I think this is great. I think what's really cool is that you and I started working together for 3 years ago, and I would say that this is significantly evolved from there. So it'll
Yeah,
be what I always think about is how cool this will be 2 years from now when we've learned more about the NFL. And but right now, this is what I think. This is a pretty good consensus on where we sit.
that is a great point. We certainly, if we had done this when the first week that we started working together, it would have looked very different. I think we would have had edge higher for sure. We probably would not have had wide receiver 2 as high or wide receiver 3. So this was fun. This is a really good suggestion. If we had a better connection, we might have had a cleaner fucking segment. But here we are.
It happens.
It's all my fault. It's my internet. I don't know what the hell's going on. I'm in a foreign land. I'm in an apartment building, which I assume everyone is here playing video games.
I know it's not a state, but it's not a foreign land.
It looks like a foreign land. I'll tell you that. I'm looking out at the street. It's a ghost town out here in DC. All right, give me your confession, sir. What did you do?
Well, I like to dabble in betting. I like to have more than a rooting interest in things. And my friend Ben and I had been betting on AFL, Australian Leagues football. We actually won a little bit of money. So I had a little bit of extra in my account. And I bet on one of those like NFL 2K sims last night.
Oh man, you did?
I did. I won. I laid the points with Aaron Rodgers.
Wow.
And the best part, I think, I've been taking like a lot of pictures around town, when I take my walks and stuff. I think I'm going to have like this scrapbook of coronavirus. And I think that the number one, like the first page is going to be when I sent this Slack message to Ben that we had won that bet. And he responds, "This is rock bottom, isn't it?"
I think betting on a sim is pretty much rock bottom.
It is rock bottom, but at least here's the thing: at least we're acknowledging it, right? Like I'm not setting out here and saying that this is normal.
I'm glad you admitted this because I went on Twitter last night and I saw that Packers plus 3.5 or whatever it was trending, and I clicked on it. And I was like, I have no idea what the fuck this is about, and it was about the simulation. Like that's how thirsty people were, and I just thought to myself, man, no matter what happens, I will never get to this level. I will never be a guy tweeting about Packers plus 3.5 because I bet on a simulation. At least you didn't tweet about it. At least there's that.
Yeah, I mean, I allow most of my degeneracy to happen privately.
Here is my story. So I'm at my girlfriend's apartment building in DC, and they have a gym here that they have not closed. The gym has remained open with a couple of rules and regulations about cleaning and not using multiple pieces of equipment at the same time, so on and so forth. And I, being a degenerate from a workout perspective, have decided to continue using this gym, despite the fact that my girlfriend thinks I'm an idiot. So I've been in the gym each day this week, and I have observed people acting in the gym as if nothing had happened at all. And it has blown my mind to the point where I am close to not working out in the gym again. I had someone come in and immediately sneeze, like immediately after opening the door, sneezed, which was breathtaking. The second thing that happened to me was I used the treadmill that's like the furthest away from anything. Had someone come in and use the treadmill right next to me, despite there being one like 2 treadmills over. That blew my mind. And then the other day I was in there and someone was in the gym not using one piece of equipment, but literally using like half the gym, had brought their own equipment in, had like bands tied to everything. And it just reminded me that there are a lot of people out there that have no idea that the coronavirus is contagious, and you should maybe be a little careful.
Yeah, I'm not going to turn this into a rant, but nothing tilts me more than people who aren't taking this seriously. It's just,
You'd be very
yeah.
proud of me. I have wiped down. I probably use like 15 Lysol wipes per gym session. I wipe everything down before and after. I even use one of them to turn the handle on the gym door. So I am being very, very careful. You'd be proud of me.
Well, like I said, I came up with the idea for that article about the weak link, defensive backs and defense, while thinking about the coronavirus, because the hard part is you can do all that, and it certainly will have an effect. But if the dumbest people don't take it seriously, we're still fucked.
Yep, that is absolutely correct.
So it really
Stay
is.
safe.
It's a prisoner's dilemma problem. But alas, tonight let's watch some football with Chris and with Sam and Steve. It'll be fun.
Yep, I'm looking forward to that. In Eastern, tune in. Don't worry, my shitty internet feed is not going to burden you. You're getting people with clean internet feeds. It should be a lot of fun. So go check it out, and we'll be back with you on Monday. Peace out, guys.